Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the power? We've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind.
Hello and welcome to Ideas Don't Bleed, a comics podcast presented by Ashcan Press and featuring Matthew Rosenberg and the Supple Boiz, Ethan S. Parker, and Griffin Sheridan. This is part 2 of our discussion with Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly. We hope you enjoy.
It's a good segue to talk about the Star Trek stuff because I had already heard that you guys had a Star Trek RPG that you did for a long time, and that has influenced the new run a lot. And that I've honestly, I feel like I've thought about that every day since I heard that. That's so insane. Because I've played long running RPG games and I've DM'd all of them pretty much, and the idea of taking those sorts of narratives that can shift and change with what players do and allowing that to influence a story that you lock in as a narrative thing is fascinating to me. I mean, is that I have so many questions about that. I mean, how many times when people who played that game with you look at that book, how often are they going to be able to point to something and be like, oh, I recognize that's from when we played?
That's a damn good question. Before we kind of give the audience the wrong idea, I think it's important to know that so this Star Trek game we played took place of many years.
Right.
There were about 30 players. It took place in a different time period of Star Trek.
Right.
And took place before Card.
Yeah.
Right.
Head card.
So it is not that our ideas, it's not exactly this isn't The Expanse. The Expanse was effectively a transcription of a tabletop role-playing game, which this is far from. But it was an amazing way to workshop some of the most innovative and interesting ideas in the Star Trek universe to try and find, oh, well, that idea really pops. That is actually a really cool new innovation, a new fusion of concepts. And from that, we kind of got to create the stew that we then get to ladle into our current runs of Star Trek, both in year 5 and the current Star Trek run. But so
on Star Trek year 5, there was the Tholians, and effectively the Tholian plot. Mine was a little bit different and built on a different thing. I didn't have the Gary 7 stuff, but the Tholians were sort of by the end of the game had 4 seasons. It was supposed to have 7, but I got overwhelmed at the end of 4 with 30 players and life kicking off. And I stopped the game. And at some point I hope to do a big finale, retreat with the people and actually get an ending. But until then, we had the Tholians. We kind of left that off on the cliffhanger. We had a few other little nods here and there, but mostly it was in the Tholian stuff and in and that was it. We had this character Bright Eyes who came to the Enterprise. It was a little Tholian kid that they raised on the Enterprise over the course of the last season of Star Trek. That was the year 5 pitch. Basically, it's the last big triumph of the Enterprise is communication and diplomatic relations with the Tholian Empire through this personal relationship with this kid, Bright Eyes, that they call Bright Eyes. And that meant that we had to know how Tholians thought, how Tholians spoke, how Tholians' biology existed, how their mythology existed, how their culture functioned. None of that stuff's been essayed in Star Trek ever, which was one of the things I wanted to really play in the comics, or play in the RPG. So I did, and I had players. I had one player in specific, our friend Adi Kavigting, who took she came in with a really strong pitch and was I want to play we had need for this specific kind of medical Jem'Hadar, this really just intense medical character who could figure out any problem, sort of our Bones, but they could kick your ass, Rhino Bones. And she was I want to be that. I was great, excellent. Your entire plot is figuring out Tholian shit. And she was that's all I want to do. And she would write me these medical reports. We would do these games where she would we'd talk out all the things and do all this science, and then at the end she'd be here's your Starfleet folio. And we were able to give that to the writer's room in Star Trek Year 5 and be
wow.
This is Tholian canon. right? So it's not like we were taking the plot of our game or our characters' actions or anything like that, but we were using the game as a framework by which to workshop these ideas and then like work with the players to make sure that it made its way into Star Trek proper. So we're doing that in the new series, not with pitch. There's very little about this pitch that has anything to do with the plot of Star Trek Year 5. But the eventual villain of the book is an adaptation of a player character. Many of the many characters in the second arc, I think 3 characters in the second arc are player characters. Like we are introducing actual legitimate stuff. It's just like from the game, but we're not doing it by saying like, okay, so the game is happening over here. The game is canon. That's not what we can't
for
do.
sure.
That would be dishonest to the game, dishonest to Star Trek. It would be bad in every regard. But we can be like, hey, does this character who never existed in Star Trek, could they actually exist? Like, could we get them into the canon? Would it be additive? And that's really exciting.
For a great example is a player character of ours. He was the last Jem'Hadar.
Right.
And it's like, why the fuck wouldn't you use the last Jem'Hadar? That idea is too fucking good. It doesn't really matter that it came from our game. It is just a genius idea. So, like, yes, you have to use. The best story wins.
What we're working on right now is making sure that like players get credit. That's like a thing that I've always been like, if we put your stuff in these comics, I want to make sure you get creator credit. Like I want this game to like, I think it has effectively now attached itself to Star Trek enough that we can like get our best ideas in and hopefully, and that's not for us, that's for Star Trek, man. Like I love Star Trek, and the idea of getting a whole bunch of really cool people all together doing a years long writer's room to come up with some pretty cool Star Trek ideas and then being able to sort of like uplift them into the thing proper is it's a pretty crazy dream. We're really happy.
Do those players know about this yet? Like, are they excited about it? Yeah.
We get their permission before we pitch.
Right. Yeah. Because I imagine that would be mind blowing.
It's been pretty dope.
So I understood about 20% of what you guys just said. And
me and Matt are over here like,
no, I'm both fascinated. I'm fascinated by the idea of like road testing your ideas before you bring them out is like a really beautiful, wonderful idea. And I'm also like once again reminded in the beauty of comics and us all being a community and knowing each other. Like all I do all day is read comics or make comics. Like I don't fucking leave my house. I just do that. And it's always nice to be reminded that like there's other levels of nerdier shit than the shit that I do. And so like thank you guys for that. Like that's important.
That was the longest run down a great bit. Fuck. I'm making fun of you guys, but actually like no, you're correct.
It's so impressive and so like I mean, it's the thing we were talking about. It's innovative. It's like a different way. It's not a Hollywood way of like, you guys sat down and pitched a movie and it has to be good and you have actors in mind and all that shit. It's a totally innovative way of telling stories and like making things that is so fascinating to me.
Well, you just said a word that I think is really important to us and to our workflow in general, and ties a lot of I think these questions together. Actually, just to give you a little tie-in here, community. Community is super important to us. We have a strong community of friends here in LA who make sure that we don't never leave our houses. We are community for one another, and try to like make sure that we understand how to take care of the other person and like make sure that the other person feels valued and like and feels buy-in on the work. And then we're part of this comics community whose whole thing is we all do our shit differently. Like we don't even write our scripts the same way, man. Like nothing we do is similar except that the medium, the outward medium that comes out can all be viewed together as a genre. I mean, as a medium, I guess. But like that's not the same as us having the same process. And I think what Collin and I have stumbled into is how to do this by community. I don't think it was like what we set on. But what that did was it created a sort of necessary amount of perhaps like uncharacteristic ego death as an author. Like both of us, our company is called Ego Death because we use that phrase a lot. It's we have tried to completely subsume that part of ourselves that's like that thing that just comes like the I don't know, like the thing that comes directly out of you, like that raw creative material. It goes through a process with us, where for a lot of people it goes through a very like internal singular process. And knowing that it has to go through an external process, either in an RPG or in a conversation or in a relationship or in a comic book or in a script, like it ties all that stuff together. And so comics becomes part of the community. It becomes like I don't know, the comic community pushes us forward and we try to push our little thing forward. We don't think of it as innovative. It's just the way we write. It's a really long, again, that was a long walk towards an obvious point, but yeah, it's just kind of how we do.
We are without ego. We are as close unto angels as possible. And by our light, all of you absolute gremlins shall live in darkness.
All right.
I mean, that's what gremlins want to be.
That's what Jack was saying, basically.
Collin is my Mordor translator. That worked out really well.
No, I do, you know, like I really love hearing about this stuff from you guys. And I think you Jackson touched on a great point that, like, you know, I remember I was in high school and I remember I wrote some essay on some high school bullshit. And, like, you know, I got a bunch of points off for bad grammar. And I went to my teacher and I said, you know, like, just being an obnoxious fucking teenager, I was like, you know, grammar's a tool of oppression. Like, it is a way, it is a way to throw out ideas, to not approach the idea, to try and invalidate an idea before you have to reason with it. Like, you didn't grade me poorly because my idea was bad. You graded me poorly because there's a bunch of arbitrary rules that I didn't follow. And I had to write an essay then on that. And if I wrote a compelling essay on that, then I would never be graded again in that class on grammar. And I did, and I passed, and I didn't have any grammar rules.
Holy shit!
Yeah, I was an obnoxious kid.
That's awesome.
But I think about that a lot in terms of comics because, you know, I mean, you guys know, in film and TV, there's all these rules on just like everything, on structure and format, on the way a script is laid out, on the way, you know, what your cover page looks like. There's all these like very intense sort of rules that are designed sort of to keep people out. They're sort of designed to be like, oh, if you don't actually know someone, if you don't have the tools to have access to the stuff, we're going to throw your idea out without ever looking at it. Like, and comics has none of that. Like, there's no formatting. And so people are always like, well, what does a script look like? And I always say, like, it's a conversation with you and an artist. It looks like whatever is the best way.
Hey, that's our line.
Yeah, I always say it's a letter to the artist.
Yeah, I was like, whatever your artist wants it to look like, whatever you feel comfortable saying, like, that's what your script looks like. And then I say, but my way actually is the best way. And then I send them my scripts. But hearing you be like, yeah, there's not a right way to do it, and then having this as your approach and being like, this is just the organic way we do it, is so fascinating to me, because it takes this idea that I've held so dearly for so long in my life, and partially only to get out of, you know, failing at my English class, but like partially also because I do believe it, and seeing it, like, the walls blown out on what it can be to, like, build something and format something and structure something and make something is so fun and innovative. And, like, I feel like it's great because I feel like that also carries over to the work. It's not just the behind the scenes of what you guys do. I feel like your books read interesting. I feel like you put interesting ideas in them, and like, I wonder if you guys see a connective tissue. Obviously, your process is very natural to you, but, like, not natural to other people. Do you feel like the process generates? I mean, of course you do, but, like, does it push the innovation forward, or do you feel like those are separate things? Is my long road to get there.
Oh, like, I've done a ton of talking. You want to do a first run on this thing, or?
You can just say yes or no. You can make it a yes or no if you want.
No, because this is an interesting question. I feel like that we could both really get into.
I'm not sure I have a good answer on that one.
I mean, effectively, yes. I think it's actually kind of, in some ways, maybe more a product of the individual part of our process more than it is a part of the hive mind part of our process, in a weird way, which might be worth kind of jumping on for a second, since we're this deep into the woods on our process. And this isn't something we vocalize a lot, but I think it is sort of how we work, which is that, and it's why we give ourselves those psychedelic issues I mentioned. We always know we're going to come upon it because it's like, oh, we just want some time to. Collin talked about going off on on a rogue, right? Mm-hmm. The psychedelic issues are rogue issues. They're designed to allow us. They are lightly outlined and they are lightly paginated. We actually do a process of paginating our book before we script it. So there's a process between outline and script where we go through and like add pages to all of our outlines so that we know what's on every page and we can at least agree on structure before we go to corners. That way we know that we're writing the same script. But we don't really paginate psychedelic issues. We just hand them out. And then it's like, Collin knows he's handling this emotional structure and he knows that he gets to do it however the fuck he wants. And I know I'm handling this emotional structure and I can do it however the fuck I want. And we play and like we get a little chance to just mess around because those issues by the very nature shouldn't be as much of a straight line, and maybe a little discohesion, that's not the word, a little non-cohesion really helps to like make the thing better. So I think we actually, and those are maybe the most innovative, quote unquote, because they're the ones that get the most formalist. I do think we're both formalists, and I do think we both like really try to make, like, we call our shots in our scripts. Like we're a little more dictatorial than some writers in our scripts because we are really intensive about what we're going for generally. And then obviously we love to work with artists who blow that out, blow the walls out of that and make us realize that we had no idea what we were talking about. Like Carmen Carnero is an incredible example of this, where like you can give Carmen an amazing challenge and she won't do it exactly like you suggested, but she will do it exactly like it was meant to be done. Like she fucking nails it. So I think, but those innovations generally come from Collin going to corners and thinking weird, and me going to corners and thinking weird, like just letting our individual jam out. And then when that stuff makes it into the book, that's when you're going to see the more things. So like every once in a while we'll talk about formalism like in the outline process, but a lot of that just comes from the actual individual because we're both interested in that. That's an interesting answer, and I like it. I found that for myself, like it's funny because it's always a learning process, right? You're always, like trying to be a better writer than you were last script. And the thing I'm finding more and more is that like I need to give myself more room to not know what I'm going to do going into something. And like, and that's something that used to really scare me and sort of terrify me, to be like, I don't really know what's going to happen here, but it's going to be fun. And like, do you deeply outline? Are you just like, you're like, I used
to, less so now. It depends. Like, at when I was at Marvel, like, yeah, I had to, obviously for them, I have to like really tell them exactly what's going to happen on everything. My relationship with Ben Abernathy at DC is good enough that like, he has a lot of trust in me where like, he'll just be like,
Ben's a beast.
Yeah. Ben is, like, and a great editor, and he pushes me back when I'm wrong and keeps me on the rails. But like, there's a lot of just like, you want to chase that? I can't say what it was, but we had a call yesterday where he was like, you have to do this thing for 2 issues. Like, what do you want to do? And I hadn't put a lot of thought into it. And I was like, just on the call, like sort of wing something. And like, by the end of the call, we were both kind of in love with it. And like, it's actually the thing I'm most excited about working on for DC right now is this, like, I can't wait to get to these scripts. But like for like, what's the first place from here? Like me and Tyler, like Four Kids Walking to a Bank was really tightly scripted because it's a heist story. Like we had to know everything. Yeah. And I can't write anything if I don't know how it ends. I can't, I have to know what the ending is to figure out the emotionality and the journey. But the whole point when we finished Four Kids Walking to a Bank was to go into Furthest Place and me and Tyler be like, let's know where we're going, but not know how we're going to get there, and just take the trip. And it's been sort of creatively the most rewarding thing I've ever worked on because of that. And it's made me feel a lot more open to the idea of like, like you said, like taking a little psychedelic break or taking a little, going rogue. I
mean,
think,
dude, I always think of your work. You've been very kind about our work tonight, so I'm going to pay you back in a quick
you don't have to
geek
do that,
out. I just think one of the things I think is really cool about the way that you build stuff on the page is that it does feel deeply structured and thought through and sort of like built. But I can't wait to see what happens when you don't, because I genuinely don't. That's like it's sort of it's like, what if we put something totally different in the Warp Core? Like that's such a strength of what you do. I'm really excited to see what happens when you don't. That sounds great.
Yeah. I mean, like the most fun I've had making comics in the last few years is that is on Furthest Place. Like Tyler moved. He used to live in New York City with me, but he moved up to Buffalo, and we decided that rather than plotting the whole book, we were going to plot arc at a time because it would feel more fluid and whatever. And so we know where it's going, but every 6 months I go up to his place in Buffalo and I spend a week there, and we don't sit down and strenuously do it. We'll like watch a movie and just like lean over and whisper to each other like this. And then we'll go have dinner and, we'll go out to a bar and talk about stuff. And it's fun because it's so fluid and so just like, we're just changing all the roadmaps as it goes, and like there's ideas that are coming up in the book that like were not in the book but feel so integral to what the book is now that like I kind of can't see how they weren't there before. And it's that sort of discovery process that I think is making things feel more vital to me. So I like hearing other writers sort of be like, you need to take those moments and find that stuff, because it's really, I mean, it's the thing that stops me from burning out, really, is like exploring. I love and hate developing a book, and then it's just routine after it's developed. And so having the chance to like do the thing that's just building and exploration is such a treat for me.
And a treat also, interestingly, like being able to do that is a privilege, right? You have to earn the right and earn the trust to be able to do a book without a clear path, trusting that your editors or trusting that your publisher, trusting that the fans are going to show up for, what might be 100 pages of walking to Rivendell. Right? That they might be on that journey, and like you need to, it's interesting because it's a hard spot to get to. But it sounds real nice.
It's funny. We're in this interesting boat where we've never done a book over 12 issues. With the exception of Star Trek Year 5, which we wrote 12 issues of. I mean, we plotted the 25, and but that was in conjunction with a room and the scaffolding that we built there. So we've never done something where we got to change the plan midstream or build the bridge as we were doing it. With maybe two exceptions. Like our first thing, Joyride, because we thought that book was going to go on forever, and it was sort of designed to be super modular, and then and be able to do what you were just talking about, right? But it was our like second book in comics, and it did not survive past 12 issues. And they tried to kill it at 8, and Daphne Plebin heroically saved that book and came back to us and was like, "You get 12." But during the period where we thought the book was ending at 8, we were like, "Well, this is a story about leaving your family home and stealing the car and driving to the next town over and seeing what's there, but it's in space." So like the point was always going to be maybe eventually they come back around home, but like they're just going to keep driving as long as we can let them keep driving. We're like, there's no time to bring them home now. Like we just got out here. So what's the only other ending of that story? And it's like, well, the car crashes and they die. And I was like, great. All right. Well, that's the ending of Joyride. And then there was issue 8, and it was going to end and does effectively end with they're all dead. And then we got issue 9, and we were like, oh, well, okay, I guess. I guess we have to figure out what that looks like. And then we found ourselves building an ending.
And how did that feel creatively? Like, was that a pain in the ass, or was it exciting to like get this second chance on it?
It was everything, man. I was destroyed about not getting past 8, and then we fought it really hard, and then we eventually got to 12, and then we pushed out and then like we killed the character, which felt so sad, but then we were able to like build a proper ending to the book. It kind of felt like growing up, because the whole book was about being a teenager and just like fucking off and not having any responsibilities. And then the last 4 pages or the last 4 issues had to be like, now go home and save the Earth. And it was like, ugh, okay. And that felt a little like, how do we keep the book being what it is, but still tell that story and like land this ship?
Yeah.
We just realized, like, no story. You can't have a story about running away from home if you don't have a story about coming back, right? Like, and
which genuinely wasn't in our plan. You know?
No, we did not want to come back. Earth sucks. Steal a spaceship. But once we realized, like, the actual arc of that story is this. Once we realized, and we had no choice, it was an easy one to make.
Griffin and Matt, do you want to take a nap while I ask a couple more Star Trek questions?
No, I like learning about things. Are your questions about the whale from 4? Because I would love to talk about the whale.
Yeah, they're all about the whale from 4. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Damn it!
I'm glad.
I love 4.
No, I'll make these quick for everyone's sake, real quick. So I want to go back to year 5 because I just reread year 5 in prep for this and I hadn't read it in a while. That was so interesting to me because the comics does this thing a lot where it's like it's a medium where you can continue a property that didn't get its chance. Like it's like bringing back an old movie series or a TV series or whatever. And you guys did a book that was a comics version of a 60s TV show that has that's hour-long 60s pace, and it's and that stuff can often be so dull, but I found that those felt just like episodes of that show, but took advantage of the medium really well and didn't just feel like you're just looking at screenshots from an episode of a 60s TV show. I wanted to ask if there was anything to your approach of that, of how to keep that book from feeling dull, because I feel like it could have so easily been.
Well, and I think, like, before you look at how we kept it dull or kept it from being dull, it's important to see what we did to keep it 60s.
Right.
Because, like, that was the real key. It couldn't just be new Star Trek. It had to be an extension of TOS. And along those lines, so when we were first starting working on it, obviously, likenesses are incredibly important. It sucks. It is literally one of the biggest bottlenecks of doing Star Trek comics, but likenesses are incredibly important. But so when you're looking at TOS, so is remembering the actors behind those performances, right? You remember this isn't Kirk reading. This is Bill Shatner. Bill Shatner is counting lines, right? Bill Shatner does not want Spock, does not want Nimoy to overshadow him in a scene. You got to keep that in mind. You also keep in mind, like, a lot of TOS was filmed on the same sets, but with wild colors. Right? They blast a wall with a pink light and suddenly it's a different wall entirely. And that comes down to the coloring, right? And how the coloring can kind of have to be used to pop. So there's all these like little grace notes that we use to make sure that it felt of the time while also telling stories of the now.
Sure. And that stories of the now bit is, I think, how we approached it in terms of like trying to make sure that it wasn't boring. Star Trek. So I tend to think that Star Trek, the original series, is not a boring show, but when viewed with modern sensibility, outside of its strongest episodes, it is slow and it is small compared to like the kinds of show. And it's why Star Trek in some ways has had a hard time translating until they just did that again with Strange New Worlds, right? Because eventually you get back to the format and you're like, boom, hey, the format works. But they had a format that works. They had an incredible lead actors, really. They had like a really wonderful core trio. And then a bunch of characters who got very thinly sketched over 3 seasons of television and then got really blown out in the movies. All the characters that we think of as like everyone beyond Kirk and Spock and Bones. Basically everyone else is a movie construction. There are parts of them in there. Uhura has some great beats in the show, but by and large, they are not consistent characters. We came in and we were like, well, we know where they're going to go in the movies, so let's treat them like consistent characters now. So if you're a Star Trek fan, you're going to get more of these characters than you normally would in TOS. We're going to actually break the show format that way. We're also going to introduce an ongoing plot structure in Bright Eyes and the Tholians, and eventually a big bad in Gary 7. Characters who like structures like this that were not part of the TV language when Star Trek the original series was on. We're going to use a writer's room. Star Trek the original series was written by freelancers and story editors. Like, we're going to work in totally different mediums. We're going to have to treat it like comics. So we were freed from having to be like, you're doing a cover of the original series. It's like, no. We're trying to make you feel the way you felt watching the original series while reading a comic book. Like, while getting stories that are structured for comics, while getting new stories that are about things like gender fluidity and trans issues, or the downfall of democracy over information bottlenecking, or our episodes are about modern stuff,
Right.
but they are told through this ideally as pitch perfect as we can 60s lens, with an eye on where those characters are going to go in the motion picture for fans who really care about that stuff. So I think that's and we really should not get out of this conversation without saying Stephen Thompson is a big part of the answer. Stephen Thompson was the key artist on the series, and is just great at that. He's like specifically good at taking that era and that feel and filling it with wonder and scope without making it feel like it's not the era or the sort of production design that you would expect from it. He's just excellent at that shit.
Yeah, totally. Which character voices were your guys' favorite from doing that series to write?
That's a fun question. I mean, honestly, like writing, fuck, man, no, that's an impossible question. They're all characters. Like you cannot, writing Bones, there is no one snarkier or smarter than Bones in a room. He's absolutely the GOAT. Like, but Sulu is amazing, and Chekhov is so much fun. Scotty's rolling in there like your absolute just shit kicking uncle. Like, and then obviously, you can't go wrong with Spock or Kirk. Like,
right.
So sorry, all the children.
I was very excited to write Kirk and thought that was going to be the big. In fact, we had 4 principles on Star Trek Year 5. I think number 2 was when in doubt, Kirk. It's just like every story is about Kirk. You don't think about that now because you think of it as like a 7-person crew, but every story with almost zero exception is about Kirk. There's a few that are about Spock, but they're also about Kirk. And there's a few that are about Bones, but they're also about Kirk. Like, Kirk is the lead of that show. So it was like, I was like, it's all going to be about Kirk. And then turns out it's Spock. Turns out if I could write Spock every day, I would write Spock for the rest. I love him. He's the only character who's allowed to use, it's him and Kang the Conqueror, who are allowed to use 50 words when every other person in a comic should use 1. Like, you can and I am, of the two of us, I'm the overwriter for sure, as you can tell from how much I fucking talk. And so for me, characters like Spock and Kang are a relief because I don't need to edit myself as much.
That's so true. Like, you see walls of text in comics and it's like, ugh. But when you see it coming from Spock, it's like, yeah, there you go. That's
he gets to do that. It's funny. We have a character on the new book called Talir, the joke for us at the beginning of it was kind of like they're the Spock on the bridge, but they're the TLDR Spock. Like,
right.
They're just there to like. And we don't entirely stick to that in the first issue, but we've been like, because we wanted to get a little Spock in there, but we're trying. It's been they've been a really fun character developed to figure out like what's a Vulcan science officer that isn't Spock. How do you do that, and what does that look like?
You guys have so much love for Star Trek, and it's like so apparent in the way you talk about it, and like I think the fans recognize it in the work. I just have to ask, like, have you guys not seen Star Wars? Are you not aware of it?
Did you watch Andor?
Did you watch Andor, guys?
Loved Andor.
Yeah,
just
pretty good.
Just fucking loved Andor. I'm not a partisan. There's a Boba Fett behind me.
Yeah, why?
I kept this up even after Book of Boba Fett. That's how much I like this Boba Fett character.
These two think you got to pick one. I don't know what the deal is.
That's a bunch of bullshit. Star Wars is the space fantasy. Yep. Star Trek is Law and Order in space. Star Trek is the TV drama. It's the sci-fi show.
We have science fiction and science fantasy.
Like, they are two different shows.
I joke about it, but actually, I do have a lot of love for Star Trek. I'm not as current on like all the new stuff, but like original series and the movies and Into Next Generation, I'm a huge fan of. So.
There's so much stuff coming out right now in all the different eras. Does that like make you guys feel? Do you have any feeling about the fact that there's stuff from later in the timeline coming out now than where your thing is, or is that just kind of exciting?
And to use Colin's metaphor, more shit in the stew, man.
Yeah, there you go.
Or I guess not shit. More veggies in the stew.
Yeah, it's shit in the stew.
Yeah, no, don't put shit in the
stew. That classic Colin trick.
Shit in that stew, baby.
But no, I think it's great. Like
It's interesting though, because we cannot watch any of the new shows without a little bit of your animal brain scrabbling around behind you, being like, "What if they're about to fucking do your plot, bud?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
What if they're about to do your plot? What if they're, because we are in continuity. We are talking to CBS. We are talking to Paramount. But there's always, like the shows are going to be taking point position. If they decide to pivot in a new direction, like, comics have, as Jack points out, comics have a 6-month lead time.
Yeah.
So like there's some stuff, but so far, thank God, the communication has been wonderful. We're all kind of working together, and so far there has not been any, any of those train wrecks that we could be concerned that could happen.
You said your editor has eyes on Picard scripts, right?
Yeah.
We know the stuff that we need to know to make the stuff that we need to make work.
Right.
Right. Like, so like a really good example of how far our access goes is we did not know about lore until we saw lore in the trailer of Picard 3, but we were writing a book with lore in it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as we did know, we could go to Star Trek and be like, okay, let's talk about how this is all going to work. And we could find ways through our editor and through other ways to make sure that what we are doing is not repetitive or redundant and is in fact still, because they have eyes on it, right? We trust that Star Trek knows what they're doing because they're incredible people and we've worked with them for years. So I trust that they're going to see this and be like, okay, great, this connects to this in this way, or we're going to give this note without telling these guys the plot of Picard, which is great because I don't want to know the plot of Picard season 3. I'm a Star Trek fan. I want to watch it. Like I had something spoiled for me from the show because of work, right? And it's amazing. It's a beautiful beat, and I wish I didn't know it was coming now because it's genuinely really good. So that in a lot of ways, that's the big thing for me is like I just love Star Trek, so I don't want to get spoiled on this shit. But no, I think having more shows is great because it's more stuff for us to use. The pitch on the new Star Trek comic is, what if a TOS book and a TNG book and a Deep Space Nine book and a Voyager book and a Discovery book and a Strange New Worlds book and a Lower Decks book, and like you're just going, it's like all the Star Trek shows. Fucking, we have Enterprise references in our book. Like let's bring it all in. Let's put it all under one roof, and so that if you come to comics and you see a book called Star Trek, there's going to be, and you have any reference point for Star Trek anywhere, that there will be something for you in this book. We think of it like
was
Marvel
my last
does with
question.
the Avengers.
Yeah, it was like, what are you guys hoping to add to the universe with the book? And is it just all the best of all possible worlds with Star Trek?
Well, I think it's that and the return of Cisco.
Yeah,
I think the return of Cisco is what we're adding to Star Trek because it's a thing they can't film, right? It's a thing that like Avery Brooks is not going to return to that character. He is he's made that clear for many, many, many years. Right. That character is vital and really doesn't exist without Avery Brooks. So how do you do what the show promises, which is, spoiler alert, at the end of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Benjamin Sisko ascends to godhood, but because Avery Brooks made them put it in, says, I'll be back.
Yeah.
Because he refused to leave his son. He was like, I'm not going to be an absentee father at the end of my character arc. Fuck that. And so he was like, I will come back. But then put them in the situation, but then by not returning to the character, a character can't come back. So they keep having to be vague about what happened with Sisko. So when we got this shot at the story, the first thing we did was walk in and say, Sisko's back. This is the story of this is the end of his story, because as much as I understand that the end of his story is the end of Deep Space Nine, and maybe it is hubris to pick up that toy again, I've always felt very strongly in that beat about coming back. Like, I think it's important as somebody who had a mostly absent father growing up. Like, it's very personal to me. I've met a lot of people for whom it is very personal over my time as just a fan. And especially in our time having done it, I've had people come up to me and be like, Jake Sisko means a lot to me. And it's like, okay, like we got to really talk about how we're going to make that work. So we came in swinging. We're like, if you're going to do this, you have one shot. And this is the one that doesn't get tread on by Picard or by Strange New Worlds or by the original series or by Prodigy. All of the other captains have outlets. Sisko has no outlet. So we were like very happy that it all synergized to be what we wanted to make it. And hopefully we are able to sort of give his story a meaningful coda that lets fans see something that I think we've all wanted to see for a long time, which is Benjamin Sisko with low-level godlike superpower. Like, what if Dr. Manhattan was a Starfleet captain? Is a dope pitch. And the minute we said it, we were like, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like we should wrap it up. We're about at that time, but I just wanted to say sort of just a compliment and sort of just a question if you guys want to talk about it. And if not, we can just end it there. But it feels like to me, as someone who's known you guys for a while, but you know, like watched your careers and been a fan, it feels like in the last year or two you guys have really like leveled up, not in terms of craft per se, but in terms of career. Like the Captain America stuff has been huge and beloved, and you know, obviously the Star Trek stuff is getting bigger and more ambitious as you go, and Batman Beyond and everything you're doing. Do you guys feel that? Do you recognize that? Is that something you think about? Is it something you think happened, or is it just we paid our dues and here we are, or did something change? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, you saved that for the last question? But now I wasn't nervous about it, but now that you've pointed it out, I'm going to have a panic attack. No, but I mean, actually, yeah, you hit it on the head. The last, basically coming out of pandemic, which, you know, I think like all of comics, you know, pandemic hit and we all looked around and realized like, oh, the industry's dead.
Yeah.
You know, all of the effort that we've put into this is for naught. And during that time, we really scrambled. We were definitely looking down, you know, the possibility that all the hard work we put into this is just going to go up in smoke. And that kind of led us to reach out in some interesting ways and to make some strange connections, so that when we were actually able to come out of this, we'd maintained those connections and it was really able to hit the ground running. So you're absolutely right. These last 2 years for us have been bananas, but we're still the same two dudes. You know, we are the same best friends who are going to comics every Wednesday. It's just now that we're writing some of the most amazing comics we could possibly dream of. So yeah, we often do stop and pinch ourselves because this is so absolutely unreal. And we do not see it as like, oh, we paid our dues, we've earned, like, you know, yeah, finally we can,
not at all.
We're here at the top of the mountain. It's like, no, we are hungry. We are constantly moving forward, and we haven't reached the top of any mountain. You know, they're like, oh, how do you know when you've reached success? It's like, you fucking don't.
Yeah.
Like, the journey is the success. Like, are you working? Are you doing the things that you love? Like, if you wake up and every day you're creating stories that you're passionate about, that's the success. Do I wish our Patreon was higher? Yeah, of course. But, you know, we'll get there.
I have one barometer of success, which is this action figure of a Duke Thomas Batman with a metal guitar with a bat suit made out of a dragon, which is from a book we wrote. And now it exists. So that's success. This thing sits right over there with my Batman black and whites of other characters we've written. But this one, we actually got to like co-create with Scott Snyder and got out there as a thing. That's dope.
Never mind. You are at the top of the mountain.
I feel at the top of every fucking mountain when I see this thing. But to give a little like coda to that, like, I think you mentioned earlier that, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're attracted to is not like terribly popular.
I didn't put it in those terms, but yeah.
I know, but we know. Truthfully, we know. We talk about this a lot, like, especially in our 20s, it was actually a big concern for us because we would look at people who had success younger than us and be like, why? What did we do wrong? And it's like, we didn't do anything wrong. We just weren't commercial for what was commercial at that time. Like, I some of my very best friends became very famous commercial screenwriters, and I look at their work and I'm like, it's great work. It is not what I would produce. And I can't pretend to produce that work. It's not like I can like will us to be commercial screenwriters. It's just not a thing. I have tried to drag this boy down into the muck, and I'm like, lowest common denominator, baby. Let's just do something sexy and stupid. And I don't think you'd be happy there either.
That's the point. Whoa, you will be miserable. And then we remind ourselves that the art is what matters, and we pull each other up. But like,
and
sometimes
so, like,
it really help.
No, and so that's the thing, is that because of that, it took a little longer for people to get on our shit because our audiences were these small cult audiences. We kept having cult things. It's like, oh, have you heard this cult book? Oh, you heard this cult thing? That's oh, have you heard of this cult thing? And it's like, oh, it's all the same cult. It's one. So we're like, okay, how do we, and not in like a cool Donny Cates way, like in like, so we were like, all right, how do we put together this way that allows us for these group of weirdos, because most of our fans are weirdos, like how do we get these group of weirdos to talk to each other and identify as a fan base, and how do we get the Joyride people to buy a Zojacon book, and how do we get the Hacktivist people to buy a Joyride book, and like these, because we're just writing what we think is neat. The breadth of that goes a little wide. And I think what's happened recently, the thing that happened after in the last 2 years, really, to me, is like it mostly boils down to Batman Beyond Neo Year and Kang the Conqueror. I think those books changed our whole thing. I think we were like, Kang was a book that we wild pitched in the middle of pandemic when we knew they wouldn't do it, but like we knew they were just back and like figuring stuff out because we were doing something with Disney Press. And I was like, oh, I know we can like get this in there. And we threw this crazy pitch at Alana. And when the time was right, she was able to make it work. And then suddenly, and so we came out of pandemic into a space where we had done a Marvel book, and not only done a Marvel book, but done a Marvel book that was a Zojacon that was like designed to be weird and designed to make you think and have a lot of words and really like sit with it for a while, and was mostly about like abuse. Like it was like not like, it wasn't like a fun book. And yet people responded to it. It sold, people liked it. The editors were, Tom Brevoort was willing to like give us other chances. Like that was a totally different, that changed the paradigm for us at Marvel, and then allowed us to start doing stories that were like, okay, here's what a Marvel story looks like from us. And so now you're going to see that, ongoing with Cap. You're going to see that on the next thing we do, and we're going to try to make sure those stories are also not like the same brand. I don't want you to be able to read a Hive Mind thing and be like, well, this reads like the Hive Mind. I'd like you to be able to read it and be like, oh, this is good. Oh, no wonder it's by the Hive Mind. That's the like that's the ideal. And then Batman Beyond was the same way. Dave Wilgos gets all the credit for keeping our career alive at DC when we were effectively unhireable. He just literally kept us there until he could finally get Batman Beyond in, and he did it in the middle of the pandemic and when no one was looking. And then that book sold way better than anyone expected, which including me, man, our books never sell. So I was shocked, and I'm like. And so that changed their work around on us. That was like, now DC looks at that book as a success. They want to do more stuff like that. They it was a great way for Ben Abernathy, who always liked us as people, but had never worked with us, to like have a vote of confidence in us. Like these two things happened kind of simultaneously, and then we just got lucky on Star Trek. Star Trek was Heather Antos going from Valiant over to Star Trek at the exact same time as we were giving up Star Trek on year 5, and had worked with her on the Harbinger at Valiant, which was a really hard book to work on, but not because of Heather. And like she was incredible, and so she came over and was like, "Do you want to do Star Trek?" Or we came to her and said, "Please let us do Star Trek. Like we don't want to leave. We don't want to leave. If you're here, we don't want to leave." And she was able to just be like, "Okay, guys, then what does a book called Star Trek look like?" So I really like, yeah, it's like to some degree, like, yeah, more people are reading our books. That's awesome. But I'm not sure we changed at all what we were doing. The editors who had been supporting us for a while were finally in positions of power to get those stories through, because they trusted us in a way that the older guard didn't.
It's funny because like the names that come up, like Alana was my editor on Hawkeye, and the Tales of Suspense, and Dave actually edited the first thing I did at DC, was assistant on that, and like has been a big champion. And like I actually never worked with Heather, but she's a friend, and she was always a champion of me at Marvel. And like it's funny how when you talk to certain people, like the same editors are the people who are like really championing voices and helping people. And it's really funny because like, I mean, right before this started, Dave sent me a really nice email, just like at end of the year, like
he does that.
Yeah.
It's the
nicest thing. And
I get one every year, and it like,
yeah. And it's just like, Alana's the same way. Like Alana's just like such a wonderful, kind editor, and like so wants to be hearing what new people have to say in the industry, and excited about new ideas, and I think Heather's the same way. And it's nice to to hear the same names that like you guys are running across, that I was running across, that I am running across. It's a super nice feeling in this industry to have those people out there.
They are the industry.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about there's the comics community, and then there's the industry, and the industry runs on editors, man. Like it's their taste. And so I feel very lucky to have editors who look at your stuff and go, that's awesome, and also look at our stuff and go, that's awesome. Like, that's kind of how you know you found the right people, because they're reading the same stuff you read. Right? Like I read Matt Rosenberg books, so I would hope my editor also digs Matt Rosenberg books, because then when that influence shows up in my book, they'll be like, oh, I get it, and go on, or whatever it is. Because we're constantly ripping you off, is what I'm saying.
That's fair. That's all my takes on Star Trek are really, I guess. On that note, I just want to say, like, you know, I've nothing in the last couple of years of comics has made me as happy as seeing you guys kick ass. Like, you've just been doing so much awesome stuff, and like, you know, I remember talking to you about Green Arrow, and when you were thinking about taking Green Arrow, and
you took me off a ledge the night Green Arrow got canceled.
yeah, and like, but just being like, dude, you're good. Like, this is like, you guys are really good at this, and like, it's nice to see that come to fruition. And one, it validates my taste and opinion, which I'm always looking for, but also like, you know, like there's a lot of times where you see good people in this job, like they'll get a swing and they don't hit it out of the park, and it's rough to see. And it's like, well, there's a million reasons why it doesn't happen in that moment, and like, you just hope they get another chance at the plate. And like, you know, seeing you guys get Batman Beyond stuff, and me being like, oh man, I hope they crush it, and you guys crushed it. And like, seeing the Cap stuff where it's just like, well, it's just some one shots, it's a small thing, and then it's just like, no, it's the fucking book, it's awesome. Has been great to see. It's been really, like, as a fan of the medium, it's fun. As friend, it's fun. So yeah, like, thank you guys so much for making awesome stuff and being something that is a bright light in comics. And thanks for coming on the show and hanging out for a bit.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah,
it's been made me cry, Matt. Thanks, bud.
It's been really awesome and inspiring to talk to you guys, and I'm hoping that, you know, one day it's a similar thing where people pick up a book by Ethan and I, they read it, they go, wow, that was really good. Who did this? And they go, ugh, the Supple Boiz.
Oh.
What does that mean?
Like, was there a subtext in this I didn't understand?
Oh God!
Oh, so supple, so
suddenly this book feels gross in my hand.
Can someone shred this?
Rub the lotion on the book.
You guys are so you guys are inspiring the next
we're inspiring the next generation of Supple Boiz.
And we're gonna put it right on the thing. We're gonna say, you know, the Supple Boiz would not exist without Jackson and Colin Kelly. Really, if anyone had
Hive Mind collab.
Oh, that'd be good.
The Supple Mind.
Oh,
Hive Boys.
Hive Boys.
It's all horrible. It all sounds horrible.
It's all bad. I don't like any of it.
Matt's Boys.
That's the one.
Ooh, Matt's Boys definitely sounds.
I like that.
That definitely
good,
sounds like
and
that'll
like-
get the FBI coming to me.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys again for coming out and hanging out. It's been awesome.
And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our discussion with Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly. Make sure to check out Star Trek, Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty, and everything else they're working on by giving them a follow on Twitter at Jackson Lanzing and at CP Kelly. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week with another wonderful guest. And in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at ashcanpress on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.